Welcome to meet the laureate of the 2025 Stockholm Water Prize, Professor Günter Blöschl. My name is Pekka Heino, and I'm going to be talking with the laureate and our distinguished guests here on stage about his work and things related to it. But first of all, would you please welcome the chair of the Stockholm Water Foundation, Anette Scheibe Lorentzi.
Thank you, Pekka. Good morning. Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, dear Professor Blöschl, distinguished guests, colleagues and friends, good morning everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to this Meet the Laureate session. This event reflects the close collaboration between XIV, who organizes World Water Week, and the Stockholm Water Foundation, responsible for the Stockholm Water Prize. Together we create a platform where science, policy and practice can meet. This year, the prize honors Professor Günter Blöschl, who we will meet very soon, for his groundbreaking contributions to the hydrology and flood risk management. We're also proud of the cooperation with the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, whose expertise ensures that the prize continues to recognize the very best in water-related research and leadership. Professor Blöschl, we look forward to hearing more about your work, your journey, and your vision for the future of water. Thank you.
Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, Water Prize Laureates, ladies and gentlemen. And let's give an extra applause to this year's laureate. Professor Günter Blöschl, head of the Institute of Hydraulic Engineering and Water Resources Management at the Technical University of Technology in Vienna, and also professor at the University of Bologna. And with us here is also Stephen Gorelick, professor at the School of Sustainability at Standford University, and also a member of the prize committee for the Stockholm Water Prize. And Hans Ellegren, Secretary General of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. A very warm welcome to all three of you. Now, Günter, we're on a first-name basis here, aren't we?
Sure.
Yes, thank you very much. You were in a very special place, if I'm correctly informed, with your brother when you received the call that you had received the prize.
That's exactly as you're saying. I was on a diving holiday on the Galapagos Islands together with my brother Peter, who is here in the audience. And we just returned from a diving session, surfacing, going back to the boat, and then I got the call from the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, and I was really surprised, I must say.
Did you think it was a prank?
I was just confused. What does it mean exactly?
What can you remember? What was the first thought that went through your mind when you got the call?
The very first thought is phone call from the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences meets Nobel Prize. This was my first.
Oh,
it's not possible. But then second best was also very good. I'm not complaining.
But Stephen, there were some issues before this call.
Yeah, there was a little bit of panic that set in, and I don't know exactly why I was called, but can you find Günter Blöschl? You know, I don't have a submarine. I can't ping him underwater. You know? So yes, that was a little bit of intrigue.
A little bit tricky to track him down, so to say.
Yeah.
Now, since you are a member of the prize committee, could you tell us sort of, I mean, this could take hours, but we don't have hours, but briefly, why is this the 2025 laureate?
Günter Blöschl is the world's leading flood hydrologist, and there's two aspects of that I want to focus on. One is his scientific contributions, and the other is the application. So in flood analysis, there's been a long-standing approach to saying we look at the past and then we view that past and say, okay, that's how the future is going to behave. But under climate change, that no longer occurs. And what Professor Blöschl did is he looked at 500 years of archival historical data, and from that, he discovered that the last 2 decades in Europe were much more flood prone than in that 500-year record. And that was pretty remarkable. But further than that, he found that climate change does affect floods in a predictable way in many cases, where the ocean heats up and there's more water in the atmosphere, and then you get more flooding. But it's not true everywhere. And so he developed a framework to take care of those issues where there's heterogeneity, where there's differences in where flood occurs and where it doesn't occur and to what degree it occurs. And it's very intimate in terms of regionality. And as an example, he really influenced the way floods are analyzed in various countries. And one was in Germany, where they had a procedure, a framework for their flood analysis. And he completely took that apart and made it part of his framework that then is much more effective and was implemented in Germany. So that's been taking off, and that's kind of the gold standard now for how we approach flooding.
To me, and I'm certainly a layman, it sounds like you're working to find the predictability in the unpredictable.
That's one way of framing it. Of course, there's always some unpredictability that remains. We're trying our best to forecast the future regarding the floods and water cycle, but there's always some uncertainty that remains.
Hans Ellegren, tell us a little about the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. What do you do? What is your main thing?
Well, first, let me say we were founded in 1739, so we have been around for a while. Our main mission is to sort of promote the sciences and strengthen their influence in the society. And we do that in various ways. We try to sort of summarize current state of knowledge in important scientific matters and kind of inform the public, inform young people. We advocate for evidence-based decisions in the society, and we try to promote the conditions for research. But there's one more important thing. We try to sort of put excellent research and excellent researchers in the spotlight by awarding prizes or grants. And that's a way to sort of showcase what science can help us with. And there is where the Stockholm Water Prize comes in.
It sounds like very important work in times when, from more and more, around the world, science is being questioned. Do you have any comment on that? How do we sort of meet that people doubt science?
You're right. That's a trend currently both in Sweden and around the world. I think we have to explain what is the scientific method. How can one sort of distinguish true evidence from guesses or opinions? And especially in schools, trying to sort of tell young people how one sort of come about to find the evidence. I think that's very important, and I think that's the way to go.
And can you tell us about the Academy's involvement in the Stockholm Water Prize?
Well, I mean, the theme of the Stockholm Water Prize, the conservation and protection of water resources, ties in very well with a strong and long-lasting commitment that the Academy has in environmental protection and management. I can give you one example. More than 100 years ago, we took initiative to the establishment of Swedish national parks, nationalparker. Abisko, Sarek, Gotska Sandön were founded by us. And for more than 50 years, we were managing those national parks. And currently, we have several research institutes under our umbrella, so to say, that works with environmental issues. And I would particularly like to mention one. We have Bayer Institute for Ecological Economics. And there's an interesting link here to the current prize. They run a project called CBOS. And I actually think that Her Royal Highness, the Crown Princess, knows very well about this initiative led by Kalle Folke and others. There they work with seafood business and ocean stewardship to try to sort of have dialogues with the big fishing industries and try to sort of explain how one can make a sustainable use of water resources. So that's a very good example, I think.
Yeah. Now, in this talk today, we're going to look at different aspects of your work, and there's one word that gets my mind running. You please tell us a little about socio-hydrology.
Socio-hydrology. The idea of that is the recognition that the water cycle and human actions are connected. So it's not one thing, humans on one side, water on the other side, they're all intertwined. And that's the idea of socio-hydrology. And that's like a part of hydrology, the water science. And in socio-hydrology, we try to actually quantify these interrelationships, also in order to predict the future, to look at the effects of people on the water and vice versa. So it's like a feedback that goes both ways. Actually, this word was coined by a group of people, and I was involved in that. Another who was involved is Siva Palan, who is here in the audience, a colleague of mine. When we sat together in a coffee shop in Vienna, after a conference in Vienna, and we thought, well, pristine catchments do not longer exist, they are not longer around. So I've never seen a pristine catchment in my life. There's always the imprint of human actions on the water cycle and in the catchments we see. So let's put these things together. Let's not treat humans as an externality, external to the hydrological science. Let's embrace it, make it a part of hydrology. So that's the idea of socio-hydrology.
Mm. And Stephen already mentioned the system that you have created, which is in use in Austria nationwide to see flood risks approaching. Tell us more about that.
Well, in predicting floods, there are two streams of actions required by society. One is what we call short-term forecasts. So we want to predict what's happening in the streams, what are the water levels in the next hours, in the next day. That's one thing. And this tool is particularly relevant during a flood. For example, the flood system we developed at the Technical University in Vienna was used during the last October flood, October 2020 flood in Central Europe, particularly in Austria, to forecast the water level and then choose the timing of the actions, evacuation, regulating the dams, etc. That's one stream where the hydrology and the flood forecast are very important. The other stream is more longer term, and it's called design, when we design infrastructure like dams, bridges, etc., levees. And here we do not know the exact date of the flood, but we estimate the probability that the water level of a given probability will occur. That's more longer term, the next 10, 20, 50 years. And so these are these two streams of hydrology where we need to estimate floods as well as possible.
Mm. Since you mentioned levees, isn't it true that they can sort of work both ways, not necessarily all positive?
Levees are like structures, like dam structures along the river that protect the hinterland, the floodplains from inundation. And the idea to build these levees is just to protect the cities that's next to the stream. But it can go, as you're saying, it can work both ways, because there is exactly this feedback between people and water. Because if people see, well, this land is protected, the property increases in value and people develop the area. This happened in Vienna, for example, because Vienna got a flood protection in the 19th century, around 1870, when the river was regulated. And this led to more development close to the river, which actually increased the risk because the values, the assets increased next to the river. So it's a two-sided sword, as you're saying.
Stephen, since you're at the School of Sustainability, as I said, at Standford University, isn't this strange that, there are probably other examples as well, about things that we've come up with and developed, and they're supposed to help us, make things better, and then having this sort of opposite effect.
Unintended consequences.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Mm. Now, Hans, back to you. How is the Stockholm Water Prize Laureate chosen?
Well, anyone can nominate a candidate. The candidate can be a distinguished scientist, like in the case of Professor Blöschl, who gets the prize for his water engineering work. It can also go to practitioners who have made kind of seminal achievements when it comes to sort of conservation of water resources. And it can go to organizations. when we have got the nominations, we kind of evaluate them with the same scrutiny that we do for other major international prizes, like the Nobel Prizes. And that means kind of external peer review with international experts that sort of really go into detail to really find the most worthy laureate for a particular year.
Now, a question to all three of you. What is the importance, what is the impact of a prize like this? Is it just a nice prize to take home and put on the shelf and that's it?
It elevates that person to their stature that they deserve. I think that Günter Blöschl has been a centerpiece of hydrologic science for many years. I'll bring up one case in point. He initiated an effort to identify the key problems in hydrologic science and convened a group of 230 people to do that. And I'd love to hear how that happened from him.
Well,
so I think a prize has many purposes and many functions. And as you're saying, this is one of them, just to showcase a particular researcher. But I think the even more important role of an award of this type is singling out a role model. So just as like a proof of concept, is it possible to achieve certain things in science? And this is, I think, that's the most important purpose of a prize of this type.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. We're going to leave room for two other panelists here, so thank you very much. Let's give them an applaud. Now, Günter, we're going to welcome a very dear old friend of yours, Berit Arheimer.
Yes,
how long have you known each other?
I'm not sure. We've known each other for 20 years, 25 years.
Yeah, something like that.
You're not that old?
Many years, yes.
Berit Arheimer, professor in hydrology and strategic leader of the Hydrological Research Unit at the Swedish Meteorological and Hydrological Institute.
Yes.
Yes, and Zara Kalantari, professor in environmental science and engineering at the Royal Institute of Technology, Stockholm. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Now, to begin with, both of you, how would you say that what would you say that your respective work has in common with Günter's?
Well, for me, it's this curiosity of the drivers behind the heterogeneity we see in the landscapes. Actually, my background is physical geography, and your background is engineering, but here we kind of meet to understand what's happening in the landscape, but also to see what can we do with this knowledge and how will it help society to improve and become more secure when it comes to water issues. Because water is, of course, essential for everything, ecology and all industry and all the societal sectors, actually.
Without water, there's nothing.
Exactly. So I think this is the kind of common ground. But then we have worked together in different initiatives, and we have already mentioned a few here that Günter started, and we have collaborated within this hydrological association of, the International Association of Hydrological Sciences. And this is where we met like 25 years ago or something.
Exactly.
Good. Zara, what about your work and any common denominators?
Yeah, I mean, we have just heard that Professor Günter has been doing the groundbreaking research regarding flood, reshaping actually how we understand flood. What is the flood mechanism? And at the both, larger scale and local scale, and also social hydrology that we have just learned about what it is. So for me, his work has been always inspiring because I myself has worked as a flood manager or a flood risk engineer back in London. And then when I came back to Sweden doing my PhDs, I have been reading his papers and then being inspired. And also what we are doing now, we are working a lot with flood in Sweden, with different municipalities. And what we are trying to actually using emerging technologies, AI, machine learnings, satellite data, that we are investing a lot in those technologies now, and to bring them into hydrology and hydraulic, disciplines.
Now, Berit, there's another thing that you two have in common. It's the question of a leadership that makes everyone want to work together and move in the same direction. How do you, two of you, how do you do that?
I think Günter replied on this very well yesterday when you had the talk to the young scientists at the prize ceremony. And it's very much about passion. If you can share the passion that you have yourself with others, it will help a lot, and people will engage more. But I think, and another thing is that, I mean, most scientists are working on very specific items. I mean, this is where we need to move forward and understand the basics. But then, if you can put this together in a synthesis, and actually accumulate knowledge into and create a big picture for people, I think this is also what people need and what scientists need to get some drive in moving forwards and see where all the pieces comes together and how it's all knitted together, so to say. So, and this is also where Günter is excellent in showing the big picture for people and the enthusiasm that creates.
You're getting a real boost here.
Yeah, that's the purpose, isn't it?
Yes. Tell us about your take on this.
I think this is a vision that we both share.
Yeah.
And this connecting the dots, I would call it, and also what I mentioned yesterday evening. Connecting the dots means that bringing things together that do not coalesce easily. And leadership means actually doing that, making this happen, because often it does not happen by itself. You want some guidance, providing the opportunities for different disciplines work together, different countries working together, also different schools of thought working together, as you mentioned, physical geography, engineering. This does not happen by itself. No. It requires some guidance or some opportunities, some space for this to evolve. I think this is what leadership is about. Yeah,
but also the feeling of inclusivity that everyone can find their role. I think that's important, both on the individual level, personal level, but also when it comes to different communities, how they are, how they link together, as you say. This is very important.
Sarah, do you agree?
Of course, I agree. And I'm thinking when it comes to water, of course, the leadership is important, but we have to also remember that although water is simple, but the water science is complex. So we need interdisciplinary research. We need to understand it from different sectors, actually, to be able to add value to our water. We take water sometimes guaranteed, but it's not always there. And we should take care of it a lot, and with good leaderships and also with good management and interdisciplinary research and collaboration.
And since you say taking water for granted, to me it seems that wouldn't it be good to have nature-based solutions as far as possible? Could you tell us about some of the most important and effective solutions such as that?
Actually, we are working a lot with nature-based solutions, and it has been one of the focus in the EU commissions as well. So there are different projects that at the EU level getting conducted or financed by EU and also here at home as well. So what are the nature-based solutions? There are the solutions that they get inspired by nature, and what we are doing actually that we want to protect both nature and human beings. So to be able to give the ecosystem services that we can get from the nature and also solve the societal problems that we have it. For example, in this case, we are talking about floods. And there are different nature-based solutions, for example, wetlands, how we can restore the wetlands, how we can construct them and get them back, because we have also the wetlands that are not living anymore, so how we can get them back to give them the functionality. And they have different multiple functionality. So if you look at the wetlands, they're not just there to do the water retention, they are there to give us the biodiversity, enhancing the biodiversity. They are there for the recreational, that we are there, we can, as a human being, just sitting there enjoying the, the nature there, and also they can be for different other purposes as well. So I'm just thinking that, we can use nature, we can get inspired by nature to be able to address the societal challenges that we are facing now in our society.
Mm-hmm. What about the role of nature-based solutions in your work?
Well, there is an English horse betting expression which goes like that. There are horses for courses, meaning there are tools that work in some situations and do not work in other situations. And the same applies for nature-based solutions. So nature-based solutions are a very good thing for many reasons, also to bring biology, ecology into the more technical systems. But they're not the solution to everything. And this we need to recognize. For example, in the context of the floods, the nature-based solutions like wetlands, they work quite well for small floods. But if you have the deluge, they usually do not work. So you need alternatives such as technical solutions or administrative solutions like evacuation, land use planning. And we need to recognize that there's not one fits-all solution to everything.
Mm-hmm. And there are big differences like within Europe and floods. I mean, you would think that once you find a solution for a problem somewhere and you can apply it somewhere else, but not necessarily.
There are big differences in Europe, starting with the generation mechanisms of the floods. There's normal floods they're caused by short, intense thunderstorms, and they're usually only relevant for the small creeks, not for the big rivers. And they're big frontal systems, they're just fed by the warm temperature of the ocean, increasingly warm temperatures of the ocean. These mechanisms, they differ regionally, and we need to recognize that. But also then, the landscapes are different, and then the way humans manage the landscapes are different. And we need to take all these differences into account in order to put together a portfolio of flood management that hinges not just on one pillar, but on many pillars. And this makes the solutions more robust, also robust to a changing environment, to a changing climate.
Now, Berit, Sarah already mentioned the European Union. What would you like to add to that? And also, you're working closely with water experts at the United Nations.
Well, I think one problem with water is that we just mentioned that it's pretty fragmented and that all sectors do their own planning and management of water according to their needs. And it's not really harmonized or coherent across the sectors. So this is something that we are working a lot on nowadays, I would say, to improve this. And we had this UN Water Conference on Water 2023, a couple of years ago, and this was the first one on water since the 70s.
Really?
Yes. So those questions have been, kind of neglected by the UN, I would say, but sorry to say that. But we are making new efforts. And there is also this UN Water, which tries to connect all the different UN organizations into one body and to communicate more around the water questions. And there also this global independent association, IHS, which I mentioned before. We are also part of this UN Water, so science has a saying also there. But otherwise, we work a lot with UNESCO IHP. That's more on maybe policy side, but also with science. And then we have WMO, World Meteorological Organization, who works a lot on operational hydrology. So this is also where we are very active, I would say, Günter and me.
What you just said, that water has been neglected, sounds absolutely staggering. I mean, does it have to do with what you mentioned, Sarah, that taking water for granted? You know, water is there, why worry? But we really need to worry.
I mean, exactly as you say. So, I mean, it was just yesterday that I was approached by the organizer of the United Nations Water Conference for 2026. And they were happy because we are thinking about the United Nations and water is about politicians maybe, but now they are really eager to bring in scientists and actually work in this interdisciplinary research collaboration. And so I think that that is a really big venue that we bring practitioners, scientists, the people that are outside, politicians, to understand the value of water. To be able to do something about it. So we as a scientists, hydrologists, we understand it, but how we can actually translate our knowledge to them, to practitioners and politicians.
I myself and several here in the room are fortunate to live in Stockholm, in Sweden, with plenty of water. But now, this summer, we got, these directives that please save the water, be careful with the tap water, don't fill your pool. It's sort of reality catching up.
Yeah, and we are having problems, especially in the southern and southeastern part of Sweden, also with agriculture. There is not enough water for agriculture during summer. It's normally rain-fed agriculture in Sweden, but now we need investments for irrigation. Otherwise, we will not have enough crop production, actually. But also the drinking water, because the drinking water needs to be at cold temperatures. And now with climate change and global warming, we have higher summer temperature. And the warming is actually more severe here in the north than in the south. Yeah. So we need to take more deep lake water for drinking water, for instance. So all the drinking water facilities needs to also have a lot of new equipments and new investments. So this will be kind of expensive for society, also in Sweden.
Don't keep the tap running, fill a jug or something and put it in the fridge and it will be cold before you know it.
Very good.
Now, Sara, you already mentioned the use of satellites and AI. Please tell us some more about that in flood management.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to modeling, so I have been myself a modeler, so we have been using the different models, but to be able to do the flood analysis. But now with the data that we get it from the satellite data and also with the AI, machine learning, deep learning, actually the technique is there to be able to help us to do, for example, the flood mapping, to look at the historical flood maps. That actually is not easy to catch them. I mean, if you want to look at where the flood has been, to be able to learn what we should do, that it shouldn't happen, to prevent it again. I mean, the flood would come, but the damages, how we can prevent it, how we can prepare ourselves better. So for doing the better flood assessment and management, so now we are using these techniques, emerging technologies. And so it has given us the possibility to be able to have the more accuracy in our analysis as well, and to be able to have, to increase our speed, and to be able also to help in the practitioners to show them. And I think that this is something that is happening, and this is really, I mean, thanks to investment that is doing, I mean, is going on in the computer, I mean, science, and also in the satellite data. Yeah.
Get it.
I just want to add that to use those new technologies, we also need a lot of data and monitoring on ground. Otherwise, they will not work. So this is not excluding very intense monitoring to actually be able to use these technologies. And I think we still have a lot to learn when it comes to predictions also in ungauged basins and how to use those methods where we don't have the ground data. Because many places around the globe, we don't have ground data. So there we also need technologies and methods to actually make predictions in ungauged basins, which we have done for 25 years.
Is all of this part of the, like for instance, the warning system that you have created?
Yeah, these warning systems use ground data, satellite data, mathematical models, also weather model forecasts. And more generally, you could think of, because we're talking about modeling, these are mathematical models. They really encapsulate our knowledge of what's happening in nature. And then when we use them for practical purposes, we should not think about these models as stand-alone things, but they are embedded in a broader framework of management. So it needs to relate to the government offices, to the agencies who manage the water resources or the floods, citizens. So it's one piece of a jigsaw puzzle. And we need to realize, if we are modelers, that it's embedded in all of these things and that there are connections. It's not standalone. It's not a purpose in itself. It serves a higher purpose, that to protect the society.
Now, when I was trying to read about, not all, but parts of your work, what you have done and what you do, is one word just sort of ate into my subconscious, and suddenly it sort of popped up: mega floods. That sounds scary.
It is scary.
Well, it's like the big dinosaurs in the past that get attached to the word mega. Big things, mega floods are floods that are much bigger than we think could happen. That's a mega flood. So they're physically possible, but in our consciousness, we think, well, it's not possible to have this flood. And maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more when Alberto Montanari will be on the stage.
Yes, we will. Yes. Berit, in layman's terms, how does one do the calculations for warning systems of approaching floods?
How much time will you give me? I can go on for days.
I'm pretty open.
No, but we need, of course, we need the metrology because it's the rainfall and the temperature that is driving the whole, hydrological cycle, we can say. But I mean, then we need a lot of information also on the ground, on the topography, because we work often within catchments, and that means that all water or rain that comes into a certain point also flows to a specific stream, and this will create the borders of the catchments. So we speak a lot about catchment scale analysis. But then within these catchments, they are all different. So we need a lot of information on soil, geology, vegetation, because all this will drive the evaporation and the water that actually is taking up to the atmosphere again, or how much that is going down through the soil to the groundwater. We need to know about aquifers, how they interact with surface water. We need to know about the human impacts, how we extract water, how we lead it in pipes here and there. We do pumping. Yeah, you know, we use it for industry, for irrigation, etc. And then the water flows through streams to lakes. We have the wetlands, we have the marshlands, the river channels, all the way down to the sea eventually. And we need to track the water all the way and do calculations and estimations. We don't know all these processes. We don't know all this. We don't monitor everywhere. So this is where we need to have clever theories of how these systems works and all the feedback loops that are included. So it's very tricky. And then when it comes to warnings, you also need to know if you have, the shape of your channel, whether there would be an inundation, a flood or not. Maybe it will still be kept in the river channel, or it will be, affecting land close to the river and so on. So this needs to be calculated with other kinds of models. And then I would just like to say the warning system, how people understand these warnings. Do they take, how do we reach out? And what are the actions when you get a warning?
Because what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, so this is often a problem also. Even if there is a warning, maybe people neglect it.
It sounds like most of the things that you've described here, that the rules of the game are constantly changing, the game plan is changing, it's all up in the air.
Yep.
Okay.
That's why it's so fun.
The only constant thing is change.
That's true. Zara, you work closely with the city of Stockholm on a new project. Tell us about it.
Yes, we are working with different municipalities in Sweden, but mostly now we are working because we are based in Stockholm, so with the city of Stockholm. And actually we got inspired by city of Stockholm, the traffic planners there, that, how we can see the impact of the cascading impact of flood. Not just that, I know that the flood happening here, but what would be the domino effect, the cascading effect of that flood on the other sectors? And this was actually very interesting for us to come into something new, to look at the system analysis. So apart from the modeling, so now we are working with these systematic, to look at the different sectors, how they are connected. For example, if we have the flooding in somewhere in this streets, so how this going to have an impact on our hospitals? By how? Because we have the, the cars going through it, the people, they should go to the job, and then if we have something like the energy sector is getting impacted, so how going to have an impact on our food sector? So, and this has been, as I said, inspired by the ideas from the Stockholm city, and I'm so happy that we have started this collaboration with them. because I think that it's going to be really added value on flood risk and management and assessment that we are doing, and to be able to do a better preparation for future.
Berit, you said you had a fun job. I think all of your work sounds very interesting, and I wish you the best of luck, and thank you for contributing to this talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Günter.
Thank you.
So, Günter, you mentioned Alberto Montanari, so it's time to get him up here on stage. And speaking of which, voi parlate italiano quando siete insieme, voi due?
Sì, ovviamente sì.
Now, this is a man who didn't speak Italian at all 5 years ago. Then he invested 3 years of his life to learn it, and now he's on the verge of being, fluent as the natives are. And I'm so jealous. How did you do that?
Well, what helped was COVID, because there was...
That's what I should have done, learn a new language.
So our rector said, do something else, try to use the time. So what I did, I sat down and started to learn Italian.
E parla bene, no?
Molto bene.
Molto bene.
He speaks Italian better than me, actually.
There you go.
I tell you.
Now, Annabelle Rayson from Ontario, Canada, but right now an undergraduate at Harvard, and the winner of the Stockholm Junior Water Prize 3 years ago, 2022. Welcome.
Thank you.
And you're also involved in this year's Junior Water Prize, the arrangement of it. Good to have you here. And Alberto Montanari, professor of water engineering, marine engineering and hydrology at the University of Bologna, where the two of you are colleagues.
Yes.
Yes. Now, Annabelle, could you tell us briefly about the project that landed the Stockholm Junior Water Prize to you in 2022?
Absolutely. So my project focused on finding a nature-based solution to treat and prevent harmful algae blooms in freshwater ecosystems. I specifically tried to determine the ideal genotype of specific zooplankton, Daphnia magna, to treat and prevent these harmful algal blooms. And then I tested it in different environmental conditions, because as we know, our freshwater ecosystems are dynamic. They are ever-changing.
So you're very much into the nature-based solutions that we talked about earlier.
Absolutely.
Now, what has the prize meant to you? Has it opened doors?
Yes, the prize has meant many, many, many things, and I'm so thankful for Anya, particularly, and the Stockholm Water Foundation for all their support for the program. It's allowed me to meet fantastic friends, gain incredible mentorship. It took me all the way out of my Great Lakes ecosystem and introduced me to global water challenges, and more importantly than that, international approaches and perspectives and solutions to trying to fight and solve these water challenges.
We're going to get back on the topic of mentorship, but now, Alberto, as we said when I mentioned mega floods, they're also called impossible floods, but they are not impossible. Why are they called impossible?
Yes, this is really an interesting question. Actually, the terminology impossible flood was introduced by Günter recently, starting from a real fact. Most of the floods that recently occurred worldwide were completely unexpected. And one of the main reasons is that they were deemed to be impossible before they happened. And this is really a relevant problem, because people and communities are taken by surprise by something they don't expect, and the result is that the flood is not managed properly, because of course something that we don't expect is something that we can't manage. And this was the reason of many fatalities in the recent floods. And this points out the value of education, of technology transfer, knowledge transfer to the public and to the institutions. We have to educate people and institutions that floods are possible. It may happen to us. And we have to educate how to behave, because unfortunately many of the casualties were caused by improper behavior, like trying to rescue the car, which is something that shouldn't be done. No. So I think this is a very effective term, because it conveys the message.
So there is a risk of us, I say us, people in general, of not taking these risks seriously. Or?
Yes, indeed, because one of the reasons why floods are considered impossible is a psychological reason. We tend to refuse the idea that we are exposed at risk, while actually most of the land it's exposed to floods. And therefore, this is really a key message that we have to deliver to, especially to communities and to institutions.
Now, mega floods, impossible floods, it has gotten more and more serious in the recent years. Do we need to fear that it is going to get even worse?
Well, the predictions of how floods will change in the future depends on the region of the world. For example, in Eastern Europe, floods in large catchments have actually decreased, become smaller because most of the floods are snowmelt floods and there is less snow, so the floods become smaller. But then in small creeks, the floods go up because there is more energy in the air, and because of that, thunderstorms become more intense. So it depends where you are. If you're saying, do we have to fear increasing floods? My answer would be depends. In some places, yes, particularly in the small catchments, where we have these flash floods, we call them, very flashy, intense storms that produce these floods, but not everywhere. And we need to be prudent in not just spilling the baby with the bath water. We need to be aware where to put the resources. Don't put the resources everywhere, only where it is needed.
There was, as we all know, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just would like to emphasize that this has been really a key contribution by Günter, understanding patterns, because understanding patterns help us in make better predictions.
There was, as we all know, a flood of catastrophic proportions in Texas this year, and last year there was the flood in Valencia. What have we learned from that, for instance?
I think these are two excellent examples of floods that were deemed to be impossible. Actually, if we look at the statistics, Texas is the state in the US which suffered more fatalities in the past 60 years. Actually, in Texas, from 1960, more than 1,000 people died for floods. So clearly, this indicates that Texas is exposed. And also the place where the campsite was located, where many children lost their lives, it was located in a floodplain, and it was known to be exposed to possible floods. What was really difficult to predict was the dynamics. It was very quick. I mean, the river, the Guadalupe River, raised the level of more than 8 meters in few hours. So I think we have to make progress in understanding these very complex dynamics in order to make better predictions.
Annabelle, do you remember what you thought when you heard about the flood?
Yes, I remember being terrified. I have a few friends from school who live in Texas, and I remember hearing about the damage and the implications. You can't even imagine these types of things happening. So.
And as you said, the dynamics and the speed that
Yes.
it goes so very fast. And even if you have warning systems, maybe I think weren't there some sort of warning system that was not applied, or?
Well, there generally are warming systems, but with different accuracies. Then the more flashier the floods are, the quicker they are, the harder is the forecast.
But there is one interesting thing that occurred in Texas. Actually, the warning system was a meteorological warning system. And the flood warning system was proposed, but then people in the communities were a little bit resistant because it was costly, requiring resources. And this is another relevant point connected with socio-hydrology that Günter mentioned.
Yes.
I mean, the interaction between hydrology and the humans is the key for better prediction, better protection, flood adaptation.
Let's talk some more about the differences within Europe. I mean, climate change wreaks havoc with all the things that we are taking for granted. But the differences are, you would think when you look on a map, I mean, Europe isn't that big compared to other parts of the world, but the differences can be huge when it comes to...
Europe is very diverse, not only in terms of culture, but also in climate, in terms of the hydrology. Of course, in the northeast, it's more snow-dominated environment. In the south, it's more dominated by the Mediterranean climate. by the dryness in the summer. And climate change impacts on these different regions in different ways. For example, in Central Europe, we're seeing, on the basis of observations, that evaporation has increased in the last 40 years a lot. Evaporation is the water that transpires from the soil, from the plants. In the last 40 years in Central Europe, evaporation has increased by 17%, 17%. It's a huge number. For example, for Austria, which is a small country, also a very beautiful country, most beautiful to my mind, and even this 84,000 square kilometers, the additional water that is lost to the atmosphere is equivalent to the total global water consumption. So it's only in a small country like that. And we don't see it. It's transparent. Water gas is transparent. We don't see it. It's very relevant. In other places, there are other processes that are going on. For example, Mediterranean, the change in the evaporation is less so because it's drier. In the north is more the snow. So there's huge differences in the hydrology. And this also has repercussions for mega floods because they can be produced by different processes. And more generally speaking, mega floods, to my mind, there are two aspects to that. One is the more technical aspect. The question is, how do we estimate the magnitude of that? Because they are not infinite. They have a limited value. How do we estimate them? Because there are very few examples that we have observed in the past because they're so rare. That's one element and on which I've also worked, and then we can learn from other countries. So that's the approach to that. And also look at the processes, the physics of the phenomenon. The other aspect is, as Alberta has mentioned, the psychology of that, the politics of that. Because for politics, it's very difficult to communicate there's a risk if it's like outrageous, the risk. How do we cope with that? In society, humans in general, they have a desire for safety, and being told it's unsafe, it's not a popular message. It's a very delicate way how we can deal with these issues of the communication of risks.
Annabelle, this whole talk is like a masterclass, isn't it?
I'm learning lots. I'm happy to be here.
Now, that brings us to the question of mentors. What have the mentors that you have had so far in your career meant to you?
Absolutely. I found mentorship to almost be essential as being a young person interested in research in water and academia. I'm especially thankful. I've been a research fellow at the Harvard Forest, and Dr. David Orwig and Dr. Ben Scott have been outstanding in teaching me fieldwork techniques, as well as Dr. Elizabeth Colburn and Dr. Diana Sharp, and teaching me how to improve my academic writing and navigating kind of the world of sustainability and research. And I'm especially thankful for Professor Laura Fowler, who's the chief of the Stockholm Junior Water Prize jury. She has been so incredibly helpful and kind in navigating US universities and carving and finding my space in water. And I'm very thankful for all of my mentors' kindness and passion for the field as well.
That's one thing. What would you say are the foremost qualities in a very good mentor? What makes a really good mentor?
I think kindness and patience, especially for someone like me who asks lots and lots and lots of questions, is super, super important. So first and foremost, I would say kindness and patience.
Do you agree, Günter? I mean, you've had many students under your wings throughout the years.
Kindness and patience are certainly traits that are very important. Maybe also other things like passion, what I mentioned before. And more generally speaking, like the idea of mentors, that's only a piece of the entire web of connections, of relationships. Because for me, when we look at it from a 360 degrees perspective, on the one hand, there are mentors and role models. And then there are colleagues, like at a similar age, and there are students. And we all learn from each other. It's not just that students learn from the mentors in one way, but it's all interrelated. Mentors, role models, colleagues, students. And it's not only the technical things we learn from each other, it's also the more personal, cultural things. From my own mentor, for example, not only learned about the science of hydrology and water engineering, also about how do you guide people? How do you relate, or how do you manage conflicts? It's not so trivial. How do you do this in an elegant way, in a way that everybody is happy? So it's not just the technical, it's also the social side we learn from each other in all 30, 60 degrees.
Yeah, I would like to add another ingredient that I think is essential. It's encouraging diversity. Diversity of interpretations, scientific interpretations, diversity of opinions, cross-cultural diversity. We realize that it's really helpful in making progresses in sciences. And this is one achievement that something that we learned in the past 10 years when diversity, inclusivity was really encouraged in Earth system sciences.
Now, Annabelle, we just had two very brilliant women here on stage. Being a young woman in science, what is the importance of female role models?
Absolutely, it is so incredibly important. Often, sometimes in scientific spaces, you're not fortunate enough to see many females, especially in engineering spaces as well. And so being able to see that representation, especially for younger girls, and being like, oh, they can do that, so can I. Furthermore, I think especially having female mentors is they've been through challenges that you might be facing, and so they can either help you maybe even avoid them, or at least enter and approach those challenges and emerge with grace.
Now, Alberto, we have already talked about natural solutions. If we talk about the natural flow of water and how as humans interact with it, with the water cycle, what are the dangers and how do we secure that the dangers don't appear, hopefully?
The interaction between humans and water, we know it's essential. And it's like a duty for us. We need to interact with water also to save water. Of course, we have to avoid unintended consequences, as it was mentioned before by Steve, because indeed, in our use of water, we may exaggerate and we may also take wrong actions. What I think it's really important is in our management of water resources to use, again, a diversity of solutions. Günter mentioned, for instance, for flood protection, nature-based solutions integrated with infrastructural solutions, because floods, we learned today, are very different from different places, different dynamics, and therefore we also need a diversity of solutions to really cope with them. I am pleased to say that I think recently the international community learned a lot in terms of correct interaction between humans and water, and I see at the international level really a culture that is really improving and gaining a lot of room in that. And I also would like to say that, I think in this dialogue between science and the public, also recognitions like the Stockholm Water Prize are really important. I can say the scientific community is really grateful to the royal family and to Sweden and the institution of Sweden for promoting this kind of recognition. It really helps a lot also in public engagement.
So we are probably looking towards a future of numerous larger floods, and predictions are important, warning systems. Are there other kinds of predictions that we have to keep in mind?
Günter already mentioned two types of predictions, and these are like technical predictions. I think for the future is really important to understand what the future climate will be. And we know a lot of efforts in that respect. We learned today that climate change is not the same everywhere. So we need to better understand its heterogeneity. And I think we have also a long time to go to improve climate predictions, which are essential especially for predicting flash floods.
Now, to go back where we started, the Galapagos, the diving adventure together with your brother, we haven't really, we've been just below the surface. We haven't done the really deep sea diving into your work, but sort of, surface and slightly below. If you had finally the opportunity to pick something from the work that you do that you're going to continue doing to reach out to a large audience, which would be the most important thing that, you know, when someone says Günter Blöschl, they say, ah, this is the thing?
Well, maybe one of the key things has been the relationship between a changing climate and changing flood risk. And this applies to the past, also applies to the future. So how to adapt to a changing climate and to the hazards that are caused by the changing climate. I think this is something we need to focus on in the future.
Thank you very much. Tonight there will be a banquet at the City Hall where you will receive the actual prize from the hands of His Majesty the King. For those of you here and for those of you watching, I would like to say that anyone can nominate for the Water Prize 2026. Just direct your cameras towards that and go ahead and nominate. And to all of you in the panel, and especially to Günter, and for you who are listening, thank you very much.